Hello and welcome to the 26th episode of the PEM podcast. I am your host, Victoria Laurie, here with my fabulous sister, Sandy, coming to you live. Not live. This is recorded.
We're alive, though.
We're live for the moment. Oh,
Don't
gosh.
say that.
Yeah, we've got, Sandy and I have discussed a lot. Taking on some of these really more difficult, brutal kind of mysteries. And I think that we try and do a couple that aren't quite as terrible to sort of save up a little bit of our emotion before we.
And this one isn't it.
Yeah, this is not it. This is not it. This is a really, really difficult case. It's probably world famous, but it's definitely nationally. Yeah, I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure you've heard of it. Yeah, it's going to be a rough one today, so strap in, people. But to start things off, let's do what we always do and book promotion. So the third book in the Abby Cooper Psychic Eye mystery series is called A Vision of Murder. When I was signed by Penguin, I was signed on a 3-book deal, and I had the first 2 books already done in my mind, and then the third book I was like, I don't know. And I was on a very aggressive schedule. My editor at the time wanted a book basically every 6 to 9 months. So I just remember the pain that came with, I was working a full-time job, about 55 hours a week, had an hour commute to that job, and then I would get home and I would have to, crank a little bit. And I just remember, it was just hard. It was hard. But at the end, I was very, very happy with the conclusion of the book. So in this book, A Vision of Murder, it's kind of got a little bit of a medium slant to it too. So this is the book where I introduced MJ Holliday. So if any of you have read my Ghost Hunter mystery series and are familiar with MJ and Gilly, or you have read my Life Coach mystery series, you're familiar with Gilly and Kat. And Kat's featured in this book as well. One of my favorite Sandy anecdotes actually was put in here, and I won't tell you what that is, but I remember calling her. We were in the same house, actually. I was writing over at her house, and I called her on the phone because I was so excited and didn't want to get up and disturb the flow. So I called her, and I'm reading her this her anecdote that I've turned into kind of this hilarious scene. And I'm the only one that's laughing uproariously. There's dead silence on the other end of the phone. Yeah, that was fun. But anyway, so Abby has gone in with her handyman Dave on an investment. It's a fixer-upper. Boy, is it a fixer-upper. And they plan to flip a house. And as Dave is working on the house, all of a sudden his saw decides to turn on by itself and go zipping across the floor. So there's a poltergeist in the house. So Abby's, she's not necessarily a ghost hunter, and she's not necessarily a medium. So, doesn't make her a subject matter expert at exercising a poltergeist, but she ends up going over, and she discovers a woman at the bottom of the basement stairs who's been murdered. She rushes down. She doesn't. Dutch, her boyfriend, rushes down the stairs and goes to help the woman, and the woman disappears. So then it's a look into this ghost, right, who may or may not be the poltergeist. A woman obviously murdered in the house. And this house traces back to World War II. So there's a little kind of fun history stuff going on. And as I said, a very fun anecdote in there, personal anecdote from my sister, and I will not tell you what that is. You have to read it and try and figure it out. If you guess, I still won't be able to say yes or no upon penalty of death. So, I might wink. I might give you a wink. But that's about it. So we had a couple of comments last week about people who saw herons and blue herons who had seen our podcast, and then they saw the blue herons. So thank you, everybody, for commenting, which again reminds me, if you are enjoying the podcast, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and ring the bell. Hit the bell so that you'll be notified whenever we produce a new podcast, whenever we get one up. But we have decided we're going to record and put it up on Wednesdays, and invariably that means every Thursday. I know it's my fault. It really is. It's my fault this time, big time. I'm busy. Well, it was the Memorial Day weekend. Just like, what day is it?
I don't know. It's Blur's Day.
Right? It's Blur's Day. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So that is A Vision of Murder. If you want to know more about my books, please go to victorialaurie.com. If you would like to schedule an appointment with me for a reading, for a session with me, please go to victorialaurie.com, or you can just click the link that I'm going to put in the description below. And if you want to subscribe to my newsletter, please do that. That's also going to be at victorialaurie.com. That's where you'll find out all sorts of news about upcoming books, about I think I'm going to start doing something that's going to be just a really light lesson in how to psychic, because I think we can all use a little bit of encouragement for our radar, and a little bit of some fun exercises to try. So sign up for the newsletter and you get all that news. All right. So Sandy's got an anecdote this week that's really pretty kind of freaky and cool. So Sandy, take it away.
It's interesting that A Vision of Murder is the book that you're promoting, and you're describing that things are disappearing and they're not necessarily of this plane. So I have a dear friend who passed a number of years ago now. I'll call him Nando, which is not his real name, but and I periodically have a journal beside my bed that I will write letters to or notes to people that have crossed over, because I'm always asking for help with my life. And in this particular,
that's like what? That's Anne Lamont's. I don't know if anybody's read it, Anne Lamont's, but she said she has two prayers. One is help me, help me, help me, help me. The other was thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's it. That's basically it. Those two.
So in my note, I asked for some validation that I'm kind of on the right path with a particular project I'm working on. It's a high wire act. And I said, just send me a sign. And I offered up in my note a couple of different things that were particular to the two of us. And the next day I got up, and my twin sons had destroyed my kitchen prior to leaving the house for their respective jobs. So it took me a solid hour to kind of clean up and do some meal prep and deal with the dog. And when I looked through the kitchen, I noticed that one son had eaten a banana out of the pile of fruit I had on the dining room table, and kind of took note of other things around the kitchen, and then felt good that I had straightened and tidied, and went upstairs to my office, and I started working, and I was intense until about 4 or 5 hours. I come back downstairs, and as I round the corner toward the kitchen entrance, there in the middle of the floor is a peach. And I'm like, what the? And I had purchased peaches. So it's not like a peach randomly came out of the blue, but it certainly wasn't there on the floor when I went and left the kitchen to go upstairs.
So can I interrupt here really quick, just to set the scene. So I once came to my sister's house and immediately was alarmed. She was not at home. Neither were her twin sons. This was back when they were little. And so I was calling around to all her friends, and I was telling them something terrible has happened. I know it. And they were like, why? How can you tell? And I said, because the vacuum was left out in the middle of the floor. And they were like, oh, call the police, find out. My sister is like everything is neat and perfect in her house. Which is why I enjoy going there. It's a break from my slovenly abode.
So needless to say, a peach on the floor was very out of place, and I started to shake a little bit, thinking, oh my God, has someone been in the house? So I called up one of my sons, and it turns out, no, he had not been home to grab lunch and raid the refrigerator again and take a peach. He, in fact, was 40 minutes away, and the other one was in another state. So it couldn't have been my son's. And now I'm starting to panic, and I'm starting to break out in a slight sweat, and I'm looking at this peach, and I'm like, why is this how did this from the dining room table on the other side of And then I walked over to the fruit bowl, which is sitting on the dining room table. And I noticed that the bananas that I had seen on top of the fruit pile was now moved to off the pile and on the table. And so I'm starting to freak out. And then all of a sudden I heard in my head, "You're on a roll." And I burst out laughing because I presumed this was Nando giving me a sign, but it was a pretty intense sign. So I, of course, called Victoria and I said, "Please ask Nando if he's the peach." And she's like, "What?" I'm like, "Just ask Nando if he's the peach." And she's like,
He's like, of course.
He says, "Gotcha."
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah.
He said, "Gotcha."
Yeah.
So that was my,
like, of course it was me.
Well, I'm,
no,
I'm a nervous person.
No. Like in sort of that, who else could it have been kind of way,
well, a stranger, a burglar, a bunny rabbit from the yard.
Maybe
I don't know.
in your journal, you can just tell him, "Listen, stop scaring the fuck out of me. Okay. It's great that you want to send me a sign, but like, I don't know, deliver
actually,
it a little bit more softly, maybe not move shit,
Well, actually, I have to say it's the first time he's ever moved something that dramatic, and definitely caught my attention. And I thought it was really cool that it was so in my face. "You're on a roll, things are on a roll." Right? So anyway, yeah. So it's one of the coolest things I've experienced from a spiritual perspective.
And then just to kind of full circle this, I sent you a message last night, right? About the advancement of your idea, the advancement of the thing you're working on.
Yeah.
So this all happened like within a week. So she really is on a roll, guys. It's going to be awesome. So I'm excited because no one works harder than me. I feel I have a pretty good work ethic. I work like, shut up. I work like 3 jobs, but no one works harder. No one I've ever met works harder than my sister. So, and I don't want to work as hard as you do, Sandy. Like, not even me.
Oh, neither. I need the gravy train to just come on in.
Oh, awesome sauce. Awesome sauce. So I thought also, I love that anecdote. Thank you for sharing. I thought also I would do like a quick little exercise for anybody who's interested in kind of, how do I kind of develop my intuition? And I always say the way to develop your intuition is to practice it. And the problem is that, that's like, well, what does that mean? So I thought I'll just quickly jot down a little fun little exercise that you could do by yourself. And it's going to require a little bit of meditation, but it shouldn't take you longer than like 5 minutes to do the whole exercise. So basically, you're going to start off just focusing in on your breathing. Sandy, God, just a brat. You are a brat.
I'm breathing. What? I'm breathing.
B-R-A-T.
I'm demonstrating the exercise.
Yeah. Okay. So you're just going to be, breathing in nice and slow, long, but stop. I'm going to slap you. I'm going to drive to where you are. The day and a half it'll take me to get there. Anyway, no violence. Don't make me get out of this chair. Anyway, so you're breathing in and out, in with plus signs, out with negatives, or you're breathing in light and exhaling love, however you want to do that, for just a good minute or two. Have some nice soft music in the bathroom, or excuse me, in the background, or in the bathroom if you're meditating in the bathroom. Maybe you're in the tub. That's where we all do our best meditating. Oh my God.
Well, this is going well.
Exactly. Delete, edit, clip. Wish I knew how to do that too. That would be so helpful. Anyway, okay, so you're breathing in and out for a couple. I can't even look at you, Sandy. Stop it. Anyway, and then all I want you to do is imagine that you're on an elevator. You're going up to the top floor of a building, and each floor that you pass, the light is getting a little bit brighter, a little bit brighter, a little bit brighter. It's a beautiful white glowing light. When the elevator stops on the top floor, elevator doors open, You step out, you discover that you're in a newsroom, a newspaper newsroom, and everybody's running around, trying to get today's story finished and printed and sent out. And then you realize that you are the lead story on the front page. So when you have realized that, I want you to open your eyes, and I just want you to write the story that was the lead story in the newspaper. See if there are any details of stuff that maybe will be happening in the next week or so that pop up, and see if you can tap into your own future just a little bit. See if you can do that. So that would be a little fun exercise. You can do it in the bathroom. You can do it in the regular room, wherever you want to do it. Just don't do it while you're driving. That's all. Just don't do it while you're driving. You can do it while you're drinking, but not while you're driving. However you want to do it, go ahead. All right. So shall we get to this really horrible case? I think that some time has passed too. Like if this were a little fresher, I don't know that I could have done this. But the fact that like a little time has passed, I think it just makes it just a tiny bit more palpable, I think.
Okay.
Go.
So our case
wait,
today
wait,
is...
wait. I'm sorry. I always say, let me get the, okay, hold on. Hello, technical difficulties here. All right, and oops, hold on. We're getting there, folks, I promise. Where's the share thing?
So this case is about the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt Shop murders. And at 11:47 p.m. on Friday, December 6, 1991, Austin, Texas police officer Troy Gay alerted first responders that a fire was engulfing the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt Shop, located in the Northwest Austin Strip Mall at 2949 Anderson Lane. Once the two-alarm fire was extinguished, investigators made a very grisly discovery. Inside the back of the store were the torched bodies of 4 young teenage girls: 13-year-old Amy Ayers, 17-year-old Eliza Thomas, 17-year-old Jennifer Harbison, and Jennifer's 15-year-old sister, Sarah. All 4 girls had been stripped of their clothing and then shot twice in the back of the head, execution style. 15-year-old Sarah's hands had been bound behind her back with a pair of panties, and it was later determined that before she was murdered, Sarah had been gagged and raped. Sarah's sister, 17-year-old Jennifer, was not bound, but her hands were behind her back. And like Sarah, 17-year-old Eliza had also been gagged and her hands had been tied behind her back. All 3 of these victims were unrecognizable after having been severely charred by the fire. 13-year-old Amy's body was found in a separate part of the store with a sock-like cloth around her neck and 2nd and 3rd degree burns on 25 to 30% of her body. Like the other victims, Amy had been shot in the back of the head, but the first bullet had missed her brain. Severe brain damage then came from a second bullet, which exited through her lateral cheek and jawline. Investigators theorized that all 4 bodies had been stacked, one on top of another, but Amy, who had barely survived her gunshot wounds, had maneuvered herself out from under her friends and managed to crawl to a different part of the store. Eliza's body was found on top of Sarah's, and Jennifer's body lay next to Eliza and Sarah's bodies. Authorities determined that Jennifer had been stacked on top of the others, but fell off the pile when Amy crawled away. Travis County Medical Examiner Robert Bayardo revealed that a .22 caliber and a .38 pistol were both used to commit the murders, and the fire had been set with the use of an accelerant. Despite the severe damage to all 4 bodies from the fire and efforts to extinguish the fire, the examiner was able to retrieve a DNA sample belonging to one of the perpetrators. What transpired at the yogurt shop after closing on the night of December 6, 1991, that led to the savage murder of 4 young girls remains a mystery to this day. At 17, Jennifer Harbison was a senior at Lanier High School, while her 15-year-old sister, Sarah, was a freshman on the same campus on Peyton Gin Road in North Austin. The Harbisons spent their early childhood in Texarkana, but moved to Austin with their mother after their parents divorced. Along with being active in the school's FFA, the Future Farmers of America chapter, both girls were talented athletes. Jennifer ran track while Sarah competed on the school's volleyball and basketball teams. Shortly before her death, Jennifer's parents had purchased a car for her, but with the condition that she get a job to help make payments. So Jennifer joined the staff at I Can't Believe It's Yogurt in June of 1991. Eliza Thomas, also a 17-year-old Lanier senior and member of the FFA chapter, participated in the school's welding and agricultural program. Like Jennifer, Eliza had taken a job at the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt to earn extra money, and after a year of employment had been promoted to shift manager. The youngest victim, 13-year-old Amy Ayers, was a Burnett Middle School student and participated in Lanier's FFA program. It was through that program that Amy and Sarah became great friends. On the night of December 6th, Amy and Sarah had made plans for Amy to spend the night at the Harbisons. The girls spent the early part of the evening shopping together at North Cross Mall, and shortly before 11, the two walked about 10 minutes to the yogurt shop to get a ride home with Jennifer after her closing shift ended. Evidence destroyed by the fire and washed away by the fire hoses was hard to come by. So Austin Police lead detective John Jones and his team tracked down customers who were in the yogurt shop on the evening of the crime to piece together a timeline of events that led up to the murders. Investigators accounted for and interviewed 52 people that were in the store on December 6th between 4:30 and 11 p.m. Consistently, customers of the I Can't Believe It's Yogurt shop described the store as a comfortable, quiet spot that attracted a neighborhood crowd. After closing, employees and their friends would often clean up together to pass the time. From these eyewitness interviews, two things that occurred before the closing of the evening on December 6th stood out. According to Darrell Croft, a former police officer who in 1991 ran a security company, he reported that when he visited the shop at around 10 p.m. that evening to buy yogurt for himself and two friends, he noticed a man wearing a military fatigue-style jacket who was loitering in the line and ushering other customers to order first. The man then approached Croft to ask him if he was a cop and offered Croft to let him pass in line. Croft refused. When the man approached the counter, he conspicuously only ordered a can of soda. After paying, the man moved around the service counter and headed to the back of the store. Croft asked the cash register operator, Eliza Thomas, where the strange man had gone. Eliza told Croft that she'd allowed the man to go to the back of the store to use the restroom. Croft hung around the counter for a few minutes to see if the strange man returned from the bathroom, but what after seemed like a long time, Croft elected to leave the store as his frozen yogurt was beginning to melt. Croft provided a detailed description of this questionable man to authorities. He was described as a white male, about 6 feet tall, mid to late 20s, medium build, dark hair, clean shaven, and a clear, deep voice and a long pointed nose. Multiple customers described two men in the shop shortly before closing, sitting at a table, whispering to one another as if they didn't want anyone to overhear their conversation. Neither man was reported to have purchased frozen yogurt, just a beverage. One of the men was described as 5'6", with short, dirty blonde hair and in his late 20s or early 30s and wearing a black jacket. His companion was described as bigger and wearing a green army fatigue style jacket. Witnesses reported that these two men may have been driving a green car that evening. A couple who left the shop just before 11 p.m. noticed that when Jennifer locked the door behind them to prevent more customers from entering the store, the men who looked out of place were still in the store, seated at a table near the counter. Neither of these two men have ever been identified. On-scene investigators responding to the fire found the front door of the yogurt shop locked, but the back door had been jammed open. Detectives theorized that the strange man using the restroom may have been responsible for the back door being unlocked, or that the murderer left the store out the back door. The organized method by which the crime was committed, robbing the cash register, controlling the victims into submission, and the destruction of evidence by arson pointed to an experienced adult criminal or criminals. On December 14th, police interviewed then 16-year-old Maurice Pierce, who had been arrested at the North Cross Mall just blocks from the crime scene carrying a .22 caliber handgun. During questioning, Pierce said that he lent the gun to his friend Forrest Wellborn, who was 15 at the time, and that Wellborn had used the weapon to commit the yogurt shop murders. Upon further questioning, Wellborn denied any involvement in the crime, but told investigators that he and Pierce and a pair of acquaintances, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott, had taken a joyride to San Antonio in a stolen SUV not long after the fire broke out at I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. After further questioning, police concluded that Pierce was lying and dismissed him and Forrest Wellborn as suspects in the yogurt shop murders. Despite efforts by local investigators to pursue almost 5,000 leads, the case turned cold within 2 years. A task force of federal, state, and local investigators formed in 1997, but it disbanded less than a year later. Then in October 1999, almost 8 years after the murders, Austin police reopened the case and after eliciting a surprising confession, announced the arrests of Maurice Pierce, Forrest Wellborn, Robert Springsteen, and Michael Scott. In what amounted to a 20-hour interrogation by 5 detectives, Michael Scott was interviewed by Austin police over the course of 4 days, which concluded with Scott's confession to taking part in the yogurt shop murders. Scott who initially said he knew nothing of the crime, ultimately confessed that he tried to rape one girl and shot two others. He also implicated Wellborn, Springsteen, and Pierce in the crime, which he said started as a robbery because Pierce needed money. Days later, after Scott signed his confession, police traveled to West Virginia, where Robert Springsteen had moved in 1992. Under intense police questioning, Springsteen initially claimed that he had never been within 100 yards of the shop. But as the interrogation wore on, he eventually admitted to shooting and raping one of the girls and said that Wellborn, Pierce, and Scott were also involved. Due to a lack of evidence, charges were dropped against Wellborn in 2000, and Pierce was freed from jail in 2003. However, based entirely upon their self-incriminating statements, Springsteen and Scott were remanded for trial. While the prosecution provided a detailed account of the horrific crime that resulted in the murder of 4 young girls, no hard evidence against Springsteen and Scott was presented at trial. Despite a lack of physical evidence and both men claiming their confessions were coerced by police interrogators, Robert Springsteen was convicted of capital murder in June of 2001 and sentenced to death row. A separate jury found Michael Scott guilty of capital murder in September of 2002. Given that he was 15 years old at the time of the murders, Scott was sentenced to life imprisonment. The prosecution's strategy to use excerpts from each of one of the alleged confessions as a centerpiece of both Springsteen and Scott's respective trials ultimately backfired. Both murder convictions were successfully overturned due to the violation of the Confrontation Clause. On Wednesday, June 24, 2009, Judge Mike Lynch ruled that the defendants, Springsteen and Scott, be freed on bond pending further action. At 2:50 p.m. that day, they both walked out of the Travis County Jail with their attorneys. The prosecution insisted that Scott and Springsteen would be retried. However, forensic evidence proved that the DNA recovered from the murder scene did not match any one of the 4 young men accused of the grisly crime, and instead belongs to a male whose identity remains unknown. The prosecution consequently abandoned plans for a retrial, and on October 28, 2009, all charges were dismissed against Scott and Springsteen. Unfortunately, Texas courts later decided that Scott and Springsteen were not entitled to compensation for wrongful conviction because neither defendant had proven that they did not commit the crime. Defense lawyers, as well as APD lead investigator John Jones, have strong doubts that 4 teenage boys committed the yogurt shop murders. For starters, the 4 victims, Eliza, Amy, Jennifer, and Sarah, were all smart, strong, athletic girls who were actively involved in sports and the future farmers of America. Had they been approached by 4 scraggly teen boys, none of whom were particularly well-built or intelligent, intent on robbing the store or worse, the girls likely would have banded together and chased the boys off. Instead, Jones believes 2 men were likely responsible for the grisly crime. It may have started out as a robbery, but it quickly escalated into something far more sinister. This theory is reinforced by the account offered by the owner of the party store located next door to I Can't Believe It's Yogurt, who reported that he did not hear unusual noises from the yogurt shop, save for the several popping sounds. While investigators assume that was gunfire, the fact that the shop was otherwise silent suggests a certain amount of control over the victims by the perpetrators, which would only be possible had the assailants been grown men, and likely men with some previous criminal involvement. Moreover, the systematic nature of the murders, all the girls undressed, multiple victims raped, and the execution-style shootings and the body stacked, suggest experienced sadistic criminals with far more foresight and ruthlessness than likely for teenage boys. 30 years have passed since innocent girls were murdered in Austin, and I Can't Believe Yogurt Shop, and the case remains unsolved. Austin police have reported that over 50 people have confessed to the yogurt shop murders, including renowned serial killer Kenneth Allen McDuff, who was in the area at the time of the crime and had a history of murdering teenagers. McDuff was ruled out as a suspect and was executed on November 17, 1998 for his crimes. A coerced confession in 1992 by 2 Mexican nationals held by Mexican authorities was quickly disputed and ultimately ruled false. The closest possibility police have to solving this horrific crime comes from the DNA collected from the rape victims. A Y chromosome match for the perpetrator's DNA had initially been found in an FBI research database, but in early 2020, it was determined that it was not to be a database match. Y-STR DNA testing, or genetic genealogy, is much less informative, and there's a much lower chance that it's going to help lead to an identification than a more typical forensic DNA sample. As such, thousands of men could bear this fragment of DNA, which alone is unable to identify individuals. Authorities remain hopeful that with the advancements in DNA science, they will one day be able to resubmit the crime scene sample for further testing and bring investigators ever closer to solving this quadruple murder. In the aftermath of all this, on December 23rd in 2010, Austin police officer Frank Wilson and his rookie partner Bradley Smith conducted a traffic stop on a vehicle driven by Maurice Pierce in the northern part of the city. After a brief foot pursuit, Pierce was shot and killed after stabbing Officer Wilson in the neck with a knife. My sources for this story include Wikipedia, the Yogurt Shop Murders, CBS News, R2, Never Identified Customers Key to Solving Your Yogurt Shop Murders 2622, CBS News 48 Hours, Key Moments in the Investigation of Austin's Yogurt Shop Murders 2322, KXAN.com, 25 years later, Murder of 4 Austin Teens Still Unsolved by Aaron Cargile, 12516, The Austin American Statesman, Yogurt Shop Murders, Forever in Our Hearts, 30 years later, by Chuck Lindell, 12121, American Statement from the Archives, 4 teenagers found slain in a yogurt shop, mourned by all, by Chuck Lindell, 11/30/21, and then the Austin Chronicle, Scene of the Crime, Revisiting the Yogurt Shop Murders, a cold case reconsideration of the 1999 crime points away from the prosecution's assumptions, by Jordan Smith, 12/16/11.
Tough. So one thing that when we were talking before the podcast aired, you had said that even if, and I thought it was such a great point, you had said that even if evidence, does come to light, kind of pointing to another individual, which I think it will, another individual, then Texas would be reluctant to pursue prosecution of that person because they would have to pay the remaining 3, right? There's only 3 alive right now, right?
Well, the 2 that filed suit were Scott and Springsteen. So they were denied restitution for their time imprisonment or wrongful prosecution because they never proved that they didn't commit the crime.
Gotcha.
So if Texas brought forward charges, this is my theory, if Texas brought forward charges against another culprit, then they may be on the hook for restitution to Springsteen and Scott.
Right. Makes sense. So we can only hope that the FBI picks it up, because I don't care. I just wants justice to be done. So, so this case has a lot of energy around the violence of what happened to the girls, but not a lot of evidence, has a lot of energy around the violence of the crimes, but not a lot of energy around, my being able to say, oh, this guy did it. Mostly because I don't think that the suspects brought forward, the 4 that were brought forward, did the crime at all. I really don't believe they were anywhere near the yogurt shop at the time of the murders, and no one else has been kind of, the finger points at this person or that person or the other person for me to kind of go, this one's the energy. This guy did it. So what I could pull out of the ether was, and again, this is just, my intuitive vibe. You can take it or leave it, however you want to do it. But my intuitive vibe was suggesting that there were 2 perpetrators. The 2 men that were last seen in the yogurt shop, they didn't belong. I believe, obviously, come on, they did it, right? The older gentleman, the older heavyset gentleman in the military fatigue jacket, I believe had seen some military training, but I don't know that he was necessarily involved in the military. So he had kind of a militia kind of, feel to him, right? He does not feel like he's still here on this plane. He feels like he has passed. The younger one, to my mind, definitely feels like he's still here. I would put him probably in his 50s now. And the image that I had in my mind of what he looked like was, and it was interesting because I formed this image before I really took in the description of the 2 men. So he had long, kind of stringy, dark blonde hair. I felt he had facial hair. I felt he had light eyes. I feel he was the more deviant of the 2. So I don't know if they always planned to rape and murder these girls, But I don't think that they didn't not plan to rape and murder these girls. I believe that they targeted this shop because they knew that there were only, basically two girls, right, who were working the counter. And when they discovered four, they each had a gun, so it still made managing them somewhat, less difficult. And systematically, one by one, raped and murdered them. I believe Sarah, there's just this vibe that comes from her energy. Whenever I look at her picture, there's just this, and I would describe that as she fought back. She was the one that wasn't submissive. She was the one that really tried to fight them off. And, unfortunately, she didn't succeed. Very, very sad. And the most heartbreaking aspect is it Eliza? No, Amy. No, no. Who's the young one? Is that Jennifer? Amy. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Amy was the 13-year-old, right?
Yes.
It's just, I can't even, like, I hope she really wasn't conscious, that it was just sort of more like an instinct to crawl away, that the bullet had done enough damage to where she really wasn't aware of kind of what was going on before she succumbed. I'm hoping to smoke. Just horrible, just absolutely horrible, horrible, horrible. Do I think that justice will someday be done? I kind of have a feeling. So here's my theory. My theory is that this one remaining perpetrator of this murder, of these murders, I feel he's hugging the Mexican border and often goes into Mexico. I feel he has remained violent. I feel he has remained a criminal, a violent criminal. And I think that he perpetrates crimes across the border because he's less likely to be caught and less likely to have his DNA traced. So I think he's very careful now. But I still believe he's still, involved in criminal behavior, violent criminal behavior. So I think at some point it's all going to catch up to him. I'm hopeful. And I do think he's like, somewhere in his 30s or somewhere in his 50s at this point. So I'm hopeful that he lives long enough that they can be like, okay, I would love to see him behind bars. I do believe he has at points spent time behind bars, but for whatever reason, because they only have that Y, right? They don't have the full DNA spectrum. He's managed to kind of slip underneath the radar for these particular murders. So I have my fingers crossed. I don't know that will definitely happen, but there's still like a feeling of the spotlight still shining on him. So we can keep our fingers crossed and hope and hope and hope and hope. So when I checked in with the other side to see, basically how the girls were doing, the feeling that I got was that Sarah and Jennifer were still there and they were going to just wait for their family members to come over on the other side. And that Eliza and Amy were getting, I don't know if they're here yet, but there was a feeling of they are going to recycle through very soon, if they haven't already. It was just interesting how the two sisters were determined to kind of stay together and just wait for their parents to come across. So that's my feeling. And I hate it when, tune in on a case and there isn't like someone that jumps off the page and I can go, aha, that guy, that is definitely the guy. It just sucks that there was no lead that led in any direction for me to kind of grab and go this one there. But I do believe that these guys were heavily involved in some sort of militia kind of group, probably white supremacist kind of militia sort of group. And we're, playing war games out in West Texas. Idiots. So, fingers crossed that at least if not both of them at some point. If I'm wrong and both are still alive, I really don't believe both are still alive. I really just feel one is, that they're eventually brought to justice. So thanks for writing this up. I know it was a really tough case for you, Sands, and I really appreciate you doing such a phenomenally thorough job and, presenting it to me, because we knew it was going to be a tough one, given the fact that there really wasn't anybody that I could grab and go, that guy did it.
Well,
So,
that and the just despicable
oh my God,
destruction of 4 lives that way. I just
right?
very, very inhumane.
Yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. These girls weren't people to them. They were,
No.
Things to be exploited and murdered for fun. It's awful.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what are you gonna take from a yogurt shop? What, $1,000?
Well, there were over 52 customers over the course of the shift. So what do you think?
If you're spending
A couple
$10,
$1,000.
right?
Well, the worst part
$500.
is that the safe, which was in the back office, was not
Yeah.
tampered with. So whatever cash they got was out of the drawer,
Right.
not
Right.
out of the safe.
Right. So it would have been, $500, $600, $700 at most. Like nothing.
Mhm.
Nothing. It's awful. It's awful. Poor girls. Poor girls. On that very sad note, I feel like here they are again, ready to depress you. Welcome to the PEM podcast, where you will be left sad by the end. Yeah.
Well, I am glad to hear that you feel there's an opportunity for this one culprit still alive
Yeah.
to be caught. I think it'd be wonderful to put closure on this case,
Right.
especially for the mother of Jennifer and Sarah. She's
Yeah.
been very prominent in the media. So,
Well, were these her only 2 children?
Yeah.
Oh God.
she and her husband split, and she moved to Austin from Texarkana with the 2 girls.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I was telling Sans that when I lived in Austin, the name of the streets and the area, I'm like, oh my God, I never equated it. Like I had remembered hearing about, obviously in the early 90s, we'd all heard about the case and how terrible and horrific it was. But I'd never really equated it to that street and that strip. And so when I was reading the names of the streets, I'm like, oh my God, I used to like drive around that area a lot. It's not a dangerous area. It's just kind of one of those, wow, moments like
Heavily trafficked, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. Well, thanks for joining us again. I hope you're not too depressed. Might be time for some cookie dough or something to lift your spirits. I know I'm going to go snag on something chocolatey. So anyway, Sandy, thank you again. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Psychic Eye Mystery Podcast. Again, victorialaurie.com if you want to find out any information about me, about signing up for a psychic reading, or signing up for the newsletter, or anything about the books, please go there. I'll put it in the description below. And I guess that's it, right? All right, guys, you take care. We'll see you next week. Okay, take care.
Yeah.
Love you, Ian.
Bye.
Love you. Bye.
Love you too. Bye.